It takes a minute to start. Okay, I let in and then you can start.
Okay.
Okay, you can start.
All right. Hello, I'm Heather McCain. I am from Live, Educate, Transform Society, or LETS, and it is a nonprofit that is staffed by disabled and neurodivergent folks, and most of us are also 2S LGBTQIA+. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a white non-binary person who has freckles, wears blue glasses, and has a shaved head. And I do this visual description to ensure that blind and partially sighted people have access to visual information, just as I'll be describing any images that are on the slides. And this first slide says Crip Kindness and has an image of six people of varying races and disabilities. And it also has our logo, which is a light bulb made of speech bubbles. Some of our members think it looks like a hot air balloon, and we're okay with that as well. So we're told that we have consent over our bodies, but then we are taught we have to control our bodies, minds, and senses, and only meet our needs when given permission or at specific times. In this workshop, you have autonomy over yourself. I trust that you will do what you need, and your participation may look different to that of others, and that is okay. So this may look like getting up and walking around, watching this in bed, I'm going to be playing with some sensory items, which are actually my cat's toys. They're little springs. And yeah, so thank you for being in the space with me today. And this slide has an image of a person's hands cupping a rainbow heart. The issues that affect people with disabilities and neurodivergent folks are all part of the multiple systems of oppression that occur, and this includes colonialism. My office is based on the stolen land of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. This acknowledgement, this locality is just a tiny piece in the larger context of the ongoing work that must be done in order to challenge colonialism and create true disruptive change. This slide has an image of sunlight filtering through trees at Seymour Provincial Park. Decolonization work aims to break down interpersonal, societal, and systemic barriers, and it must include our inherent ableism. So 30 to 35% of Indigenous people in Canada self-identify as having a disability. This slide has a photograph of a totem pole against a blue sky with a border of wavy lines. Many Indigenous people have those disabilities because of the collective trauma and oppression that is a result of colonialization and an ongoing genocide. People with disabilities face exclusion from education, employment, and our communities. Exclusion and a lack of access to disability supports perpetuates the poverty for people with disabilities and their families, and the result is isolation, increased vulnerability, and limited opportunity. Disability awareness must be part of moving away from our colonial practices. We need to question what privileges we have because of colonialism and what we can do beyond the land acknowledgement. So a note on language, CRIP and MAD are two terms that disabled people are reclaiming, much as the 2S LGBTQIA+ community has done with the term queer. For those unfamiliar with 2S LGBTQIA+, 2S is two-spirit, L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bisexual, T is trans, Q is queer or questioning, I is intersex, and A is asexual, aromantic, agender, and the plus is the many more identities that there are. Please keep in mind that CRIP and MAD should not be used by non-disabled people unless specifically talking about somebody who uses those as their identifier. And this slide has an image of somebody who's at a pride parade. They Their mouth is nice and wide open and they have a rainbow wig on. So an example is that I am proudest to be called a CRIP doula. This is a disability justice term for someone who helps disabled people navigate our complex systems, provide resources, support, and build community. And this title means the most to me because it was given to me by disability community members who appreciate and have felt the positive effects of my work. Non-disabled people can refer to me as a CRIP doula, as that is a title that I use. However, if you don't know if a person uses the terms CRIP or MAD, do not use it. And this slide has an image of the outline of two hands cupping a giant red heart with two small hearts on either side. So the term CRIP doula was created in conversation between disability justice advocates Leah Lakshmi Piepzana, Sarah Sima, and Stacey Park Milburn for Leah's book Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice. Milburn said that CRIP doulaing was the process by which disabled people mentor other disabled people in learning new disabled skills, from how to drive a wheelchair and negotiate with care attendants to how to have sex. And this slide has an image of 6 people who have different disabilities. Milburn said that until she invented the term in 2017, there was no word to describe this process of disabled to disabled mentorship and skill sharing. She added that if you don't have words for something, it's hard to do or imagine that it's possible. As people are often unfamiliar with the term CRIP, I have asked the amazing Hannah Sullivan-Facknitz to define it, and the following is Hannah's definition. Defining CRIP, one mad, sick, queer quips imagining. CRIP is not a synonym for disabled. CRIP cannot be substituted for disability or disabled people. To call something CRIP or to CRIP something, like to queer or indigenize, is to claim something specific about it, something political and aspirational. CRIP arrives to us as the shared communal collaborative dreamscape, theorizing and organizing of queer, Black, Indigenous, people of color, disabled people surviving and thriving in spite of the systems of oppression and domination that invade our lives, like capitalism, colonialism, white supremacy, and forms of cisgender or heterosexual dominance. And this slide is an image from Disabled in Here, which is a disability-led stock photo website. And this particular photo was taken by Shona Kassinger and shows 3 people of color with their fists raised. CRIP emerges from generations of liberation activists against movements, sharing lineage with the expected, like the ACT UP, who forced the Federal Drug Administration in the 1990s to approve antiretrovirals for HIV and AIDS patients, and unexpected organizers like the Black Panthers and the BIPOC leftist anarchists of the 20th century. And this slide has a photo of the backs of 2 Black Panthers at a protest. Because disability can affect anybody, we are astonishingly rich in our varied ways of being in disabled community. However, because acquired disability, especially disability acquired via systemic violence and or neglect, the politics of CRIP are seeded with the radical imaginings of Black liberation, Indigenous resurgence, queer uplift, and many other intersectional dreams of liberated, interdependent futures. And this slide has an illustration of a bunch of people who are in front of a galaxy in the future. So that is where CRIP comes from. But what is CRIP if not a synonym for disabled or disabled person? CRIP for me is a way of embodying, owning, carrying the political nature of my body mind in a way that prioritizes justice, of remembering that when I encounter the oppressive hardships of ableism and anti-queerness, I move to amplify those who are even more profoundly affected, like my BIPOC kin, of acting in defiance of the prevailing anti-disabled, anti-other orientation of the world that actively plans for me and my kin's elimination through forced sterilization, gene editing, that aims to eliminate certain bodies before we are even born, and the neglect or disabled of other marginalized people. I also remember that I counter the oppressive hardships of ableism and anti-queerness. I move to amplify those who are even more profoundly affected, like my BIPOC kin. And this slide has 3 photographs, one of a Black woman holding a sign that says, "I want to be heard," one of 2 people with a rainbow across their faces, and an Asian lady who's being kissed on the nose, and one of a person who's holding a sign up that says human rights. CRIP is acting interdependently and with ethical obligation to our forebears, ancestors, and future kin of surviving, of thriving in this devastatingly ableist world with my CRIP kin. CRIP requires me to live into, rather than arriving permanently, to live into disabled, Black, Indigenous, queer, and other forms of justice in all that I do, from the personal and interpersonal to the scholarly and public. We do not just intersect, we are structurally entangled together, interwoven in ways that allow for expansive notions of self that bleed between individuals into radical, beloved community. CRIP weaves its way through all disabilities, learning and anticipating justice for all disabled people of all identities. It thrives on its synergy with MAD, lowercase d-def, capital D-def, and other disabled politics like autistic activism and sick community care. And this slide has a rainbow infinity symbol as a symbol of autism and neurodivergence. CRIP is aspirational. It is the kind of radical justice I strive to embody in all that I do. CRIP is about dreams, big, beautiful, world-breaking dreams that are grounded in disabled knowledge and apocalyptic survival that threatens to remake us all. And this slide has an image of somebody who's got a watering can and red hearts are coming out of it onto the flowers. So that was a definition by Hannah Sullivan Facknix. I thought maybe we'd pause here to see if anybody had any thoughts on the definition. All right, we can always unmute or raise your hand if you do have thoughts as we go on. So why is CRIP work necessary? Disabled people have to fight for our existence. We have to advocate for our space, protect one another from institutionalization, create support systems, care networks, and communication webs. And this slide has an image of 3 people, one with a cane, one with a walker. All 3 are masked. And this also is from the website Disabled and Here. As Audre Lorde said in her poem, A Litany for Survival, we were never meant to survive. We live with that reality and we fight for liberation to ensure that others do not have to live with the weight of that on their shoulders and hearts. A large part of my work is community building and modeling how equity and accessibility can be achieved. The systems have failed disabled people, and so we engage in care work with one another. Within our network of community care, we know that we can ask for what we need while still preserving our independence, integrity, and autonomy. We engage with each other and create and explore new ways of doing things, and lessen our collective dependency on a system that has and continues to harm us and disregard our collective needs. It is a delicate balance, but it is so beautiful when it works. I do what I can to create safer space and invite people to be an active part of community. I use the term safer space instead of safe to recognize that people's experience with safety varies and that some of our members don't feel safe anywhere. I create an environment where truth and vulnerability are valued, recognized, and appreciated. It is amazing work. I get to witness people undo the damaging teachings of suppressing themselves and their identities and create an environment where people can freely be their full selves, become who they hope to be, and help others reclaim their authenticity. We lay bare our raw selves, speak our truths, acknowledge our limits, and share our strengths. And this slide also has a photograph from Disabled and Here, and it's a photograph of 5 people on a patio who are having a good time and laughing in community. We engage in CRIP work with each other because we care about each other in a way that fights against a society that continues to fail us. It is community care in action. It's beautiful to see the ways that we show up for one another. We need this type of collective care outside of the disability community as well. Pictured here are 9 members of Chronically Queer. This photo was taken during a Pride parade, and there are people holding signs that say, I am a lesbian, I have an invisible illness, I am proud. One member is pointing to his shirt and it says mutant and proud. We also have somebody who's holding a sign that says, spoiler alert, disabled people can be queer too. And my personal favorite, queer here and a pain in the ass for medical and gender systems everywhere. So the day of the Pride Parade, we were all so excited to represent disabled people in the parade. I had fought for accommodations for months in advance with our hosting organization. We were promised things like a vehicle for our members if they couldn't walk the entire parade route. However, on the day, those accommodations were not available. We had hoped that our access needs would be met by the organization who had promised that they would. However, they were not. We knew that this was going to mean more pain, exhaustion, and sensory overload for our members. But as a group, we decided to continue. We had anticipated that our needs would not be met because it happens so routinely. And without discussing it, we had the tools to support one another. One group member had brought electric fans and spray bottles of water for members to use in the heat. Another had cold water bottles to share with us. One member shared their wheelchair and walked the whole parade route, knowing that their body would suffer because of this. However, it meant that an injured member with sensory overload could stay with us. So just a note that there are ambulatory disabled people who can walk but need a wheelchair because walking is painful, damaging to their body, or a variety of other reasons. During the parade, we all tried to check in with other members to see how they were doing, if they needed anything, and if so, how we could help. We did all of these things because we care for each other in a way that fights against a society that continues to fail us. This is community care in action. This is the type of collective care that I mentioned that we need outside of the disability community as well. I'm wondering if anyone wants to share what collective care means to you, or community care. So people have been doing CRIP work for decades. Unfortunately, the history is often lost to people who don't understand the importance of the work being done. An example is Marsha P. Johnson, one of the first people reported to have thrown a brick at the Stonewall Uprising. Stonewall was a spontaneous demonstration in 1969 following a police raid of the Stonewall Inn, a popular gay club. It led to 6 days of protests and violence by police against gay rights activists. Stonewall served as a catalyst in the US for the 2S LGBTQIA+ rights. Marsha P. Johnson, who's shown on this slide in a rare color photo, is smiling at the photographer, a cigarette in her hand, as she sits on a stoop in pink leggings, green pants, a beige pattern jacket, a red scarf, and a sparkly pink hat. The photographer is unknown. The photograph was taken in 1982. Marsha P. Johnson is known for Stonewall, but her disability activism is hardly ever mentioned. Marsha, along with Sylvia Rivera, founded STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, to house, feed, and clothe young transgender people. This is one of the earliest examples of 2S LGBTQI plus disability organizations that I could find in my research. STAR is considered a groundbreaking organization in the queer liberation movement and a model for other organizations. Because of the language of the day, it wasn't explicitly about disability. However, Marsha and Sylvia tended to the mental health of many, taught them resources, built community. Marsha had mental health issues and a physical disability. She fought for access to treatment. She also advocated for the acknowledgement that the mental health issues were the direct result of marginalization, institutionalization, and violence that is perpetuated against people like sex workers and trans folk. She and Sylvia also advocated for community living rights, for medical professionals to stop the mentality of curing. And unfortunately, this is work that we continue to do today. I think it is vital to learn from, remember, and honor the work that has been done by those who come before us. Not only for us to learn about their lives and experience, but to understand how disability community has continually been finding ways to fight the system while caring individually and collectively for one another. Marsha P. Johnson said, "I'll always be known for reaching out to young people who have had no one to help them out. So I help them out with a place to stay or some food to eat or some change for their pocket, and they never forget it. A lot of times I reach my hand out to people in the gay community that just don't have nobody to help them when they're down and out." She also said, in regards to the fight for freedom, no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. And this slide has an image of two hands reaching out to each other. Crip kindness means offering care simply because it's the right thing to do, not because you expect anything in return. It recognizes that people have hard days, trauma, and feelings that might be invisible. Crip kindness holds space for this truth, moving forward even when kindness isn't given back. It's not transactional. It's about extending heart and compassion and understanding everyone's struggles. But Crip kindness also knows the importance of strong boundaries. These boundaries clearly communicate needs and keep us safe emotionally and mentally. While Crip kindness accepts there's much we don't see in any situation, it stands firm in respecting our own limits and expects others to honor them as well. Crip theory argues that boundaries are essential tools for challenging ableism and compulsory abledness, social pressures that demand certain kinds of energy and participation. Approving and asserting boundaries is a direct way to refuse unrealistic standards, protect one's health, and honor the need for downtime, flexibility, and interdependence. And this slide has an illustration of a person whose battery symbol above their head is low. Choosing kindness requires courage and inner strength, especially when it's not always appreciated, noticed, and/or rewarded. Remaining consistent in this kindness and compassion, even when it's difficult, and despite others' responses, takes determination and demonstrates that kindness is not dependent on outside approval. And this slide has an image of 3 people. 2 have a heart above their head and 1 has a rain cloud. As Khalil Gibran says, tenderness and kindness are not signs of weakness and despair, but manifestations of strength and resolution. And this slide has an illustration of a person who's meditating, and above them is their brain and flowers. Opening your heart, especially in hard times, is a genuine display of effort and intention. It requires genuine strength and courage. It challenges the notion that strength is only found in force, aggression, and dominance, and affirms that generosity and warmth carry real impact and meaning. This slide has an illustration of a heart that is filled with flowers. Kindness creates connection, mends division, supports growth, and nurtures community. Even in adversity and trying moments, consistently acting with kindness demonstrates integrity and character, proving that compassion has its own quiet strength. It is subtle but transformative. Crip kindness is also radically accepting that we all have something to offer and working to see everyone, including our own, inherent value. Crip kindness is extending compassion to yourself and working to find a kinder or more neutral voice in your head. Crip kindness is giving yourself grace for having to work against systems and structures that are deeply and inherently rooted in prejudice, discrimination, bias, and isms. It is fighting against the idea that certain lives are less valuable. It is offering yourself rest and respite when needed and allowing yourself to ask for help. Crip kindness is existing in a world that gives you subtle and harsh messages about you not belonging and fighting against that by finding space and community for yourself, whether in person, online, or otherwise. It is seeing yourself as an essential part of the justice movement and taking active steps to work towards liberation for all. And this slide has a photograph of a very comfortable looking kitten who is snoozing and resting. Crip kindness is fostering kindness in one another. It is sharing what works for you while supporting and empowering others to see the beauty and value within themselves. It is opening your heart and allowing for a full range of complex emotions within you and others. And this slide has an image of 4 people's hands that are cupped around a heart. Crip kindness is motivated. It is leaving bits of ourselves for future generations through shared communities and histories. It is showing our disability pride and letting others see that they can feel less alone. It is allowing for disability pride that has days of frustration, pain, and exhaustion. It is being realistic and not expecting pride 100% of the time from yourself or others. It is dreaming of what could be and working so that someone someday can experience that. Crip kindness is acknowledging that we may not see the fruits of our work in our lifetime, but that we still do it out of kindness and love for generations to come. And this slide has an image of a repeat of the watering can that is letting hearts go on to flowers. Crip theory challenges dominant ideas about what bodies and minds should do, advocates for authentic self-care, and celebrates fluid, adaptive ways of setting limits in a world built on ableist expectations. For example, recognizing individual needs, resisting harmful norms, and embracing interdependence instead of compulsory independence. And this slide has 4 illustrations that are put together. One is of a person hugging their brain. One is of a person who's listening to music and flowers are coming out of their head. One is a person who's surrounded by a sunflower and they're hugging themselves. And one person who's watering themselves and their t-shirt says self-care. Crip skills, practicing authenticity. Crip skills are everyday ways that disabled and neurodivergent people navigate systems that ignore or undermine their needs. Saying no, pausing before accepting a request, and communicating needs with empathy are all concrete Crip skills. These skills challenge the expectation that care and productivity must always come before personal wellness and access. And this slide has an image of a person whose hands are up and their face is kind of screwed up in a no sort of way. Another CRIP skill is reframing boundaries as resistance. In CRIP kindness, setting boundaries isn't about failing to fit in. It's a powerful mode of resistance. Each time someone prioritizes self-reflection, energy management, or flexible engagement, they subvert ableist norms and envision a world where disabled and CRIP lives and voices matter. CRIP theory shows that the right to boundaries is fundamental, not a privilege to be earned by meeting outside standards. It reframes boundary setting as an act of collective care and political refusal of ableism. This slide has an image of a line of disabled and queer people who are waving. CRIP kindness fights against capitalism and internalized ableism. CRIP theory and skills directly challenge the way capitalism and internalized ableism teach people to tie their worth to productivity. Capitalism prioritizes relentless productivity and profit, which is weaponized against disabled people by treating non-productivity or unconventional participation as lesser or shameful. When someone can't conform to these standards by working part-time, needing rest, or taking care of their body, they're often made to feel like a burden. This is the root of internalized ableism. When people adopt the dominant message that rest is lazy or self-care is a weakness and experience guilt and shame for meeting their own needs. And this slide has an image of a capitalist cat who's got a crown on and a necklace with a dollar bill, and they're covered with dollar bills of various amounts. So this was something I had to work really hard not to internalize. I was made to feel shame for staying home, not working, having to rest, and taking time for my body, mind, and self to recover. I had to actively ignore and disregard the many microaggressions and larger aggressions that claimed I wasn't trying hard enough, that I was lazy, that I could be doing more if I wanted to, that I should work no matter what my pain levels. It took me almost a decade of having a disability to finally allow myself to honor that my body and brain needed. Unfortunately, I did a lot of damage to myself in that decade, and I psychologically affected by both the external and internal shame. And I am certainly not alone in experiencing this. So one thing that really helped me was my cats. The cats are very good at relaxing, and getting cats definitely helped me. This slide has an image of my backyard, which has a patio filled with pots of flowers, particularly grasses. And to the right is my previous cat, Nikita, and I'm sitting in a large circular chair. CRIP kindness to ourselves as resistance. CRIP kindness disrupts the narrative that productivity equals value by celebrating body minds that rest, recover, and move at their own pace, what's called CRIP time. It insists that honoring one's need is not just acceptable, but essential, a radical counter to capitalism's expectation of constant labor. So we have to work on rejecting productivity as a measure of worth. That's a key CRIP skill. Resting, pacing, and self-care are acts of political resistance. Reimagining value in terms of adaptation, creativity, and sustainability, not conformity or sacrifice. CRIP theory encourages collective care and interdependence instead of grind culture and martyrdom for work. Most disabled people struggle for years against internalized ableism, shame after resting, guilt during downtime, and anxiety about doing enough result from centuries of capitalist and ableist messages. CRIP theory and skills help unlearn these harmful beliefs. So, naming and refusing the martyrdom of workaholic culture, practicing self-compassion and reframing rest as vital, not a luxury, creating and maintaining boundaries as a way of fighting for disability justice and against capitalist exploitation. CRIP theory connects the fight against capitalism and internalized ableism by turning everyday acts of boundary setting, rest, and self-care into collective resistance and liberation, reclaiming value on disabled and neurodivergent terms. Disability justice principles were created as a direct response to mainstream disability movements leaving out Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other multiply marginalized disabled people whose experiences are shaped not just by ableism, but by racism, colonialism, and other forms of oppression. Disability justice, created by collectives like Sins Invalid, centers those most impacted, BIPOC, queer, trans, and multiply marginalized people, and brings anti-capitalist cross-movement solidarity into the framework. Intersectionality is at its core. It recognizes that disabled people hold many identities and experience compounded barriers that affect their relationship to rest, care, and the ability to prioritize needs. That slide has an image, again, from Disabled in Here, a disability-led stock photography website, and it has 3 Black people whose fists are raised in the air. How intersectionality affects rest, care, and needs. So disabled, BIPOC, and queer people often experience overlapping forms of oppression, ableism, racism, classism, sexism, and more that shape how society values their needs, access to care, and ability to rest. Capitalism and white supremacy reinforce standards that measure worth by productivity and independence, rendering disabled BIPOC unproductive or disposable, and making self-care and rest especially fraught with shame and stigma. Disability justice reframes rest and care as collective resistance, not selfishness or laziness, saying that disabled people, especially those at the intersections, have a right to care, access, and rest. Disability justice and CRIP kindness teach that prioritizing rest, care, and boundaries is not just personal healing, but collective liberation, especially for those impacted by multiple systems of oppression. And this slide has an image of a group of people whose arms are all around each other. Those are the slides that I have. Does anybody have any questions or want to add anything? No, if not, I can talk. I don't have slides for this bit, but I can talk a bit about one of the things that I get asked about in this course is often about how to set boundaries when you're, an empathic or sensitive or intuitive kind of person. You may feel other people's pain deeply, sometimes more than your own. And while sensitivity can be a gift, it can often leave you drained as you care for others before yourself. And this can make setting boundaries quite difficult. So some common struggles with boundaries may include not recognizing your needs until it's too late, fearing that saying no will make people value you less, feeling that assertiveness is too harsh or aggressive. And as a result of these, you may stay quiet when you're uncomfortable or say yes when you're exhausted, avoid asking for help, and apologize excessively when trying to set limits. The truth is, you're not bad at boundaries. You just need a style that feels natural and kind. So some practical ways to set boundary is to identify your needs. So ask yourself, how much solitude restores me? What drains me quickly? With whom do I feel my best or my worst? How do I check in with myself regularly, even briefly, or adjust my needs as needed? Pause before saying yes. Instead of responding automatically, give yourself a moment. Try, I need to check my schedule and I will get back to you. I'm not sure yet, but I'll let you know tomorrow. Both of these let you actually have the time, energy, or desire, or if you simply don't want to. Your wants matter too. So saying no with empathy, boundaries don't have to feel cold or harsh. You can be kind and firm at the same time. So examples would include, I want to support you right now, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'll check in once I'm feeling a little steadier. Or I loved our conversation. I'm just getting really tired, so I'm going to need to head home. Or professionally, if I take that on, I'll be compromising other projects. I need to give my best to what I already have. Or I respond to emails during business hours. If you reach out in the evening, I'll get back to you the next workday. And it's important as we do this to notice reactions. So, how others respond to your limits says a lot about the relationship. Do they respect your no or push against it? Do they try to guilt you? Healthy relationships honor your needs. So, some key takeaways are that boundaries are not about being unkind, they're about protecting your energy, honoring your needs, and sustaining your ability to care. Start small, practice consistently, and remember that your needs are just as valid as anyone else's. And the guidance about boundaries fits very closely with CRIP skills and theory because both emphasize recognizing individual needs, resisting harmful norms, and embracing interdependence instead of compulsory independence. CRIP theory challenges the dominant ideas about what the body should do, advocates for authentic self care, and celebrates fluid, adaptive ways of setting limits in a world that has ableist expectations. So I did in the workshop leave some room. Oh, sorry about that. Leave some room for conversation. And so since that didn't happen, we're going to end a little bit early today.
Okay, so you want me to end?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So I'll
All right.
speak.